Welcome back to Beer Time with Books. And boy, do we have a special one today. It is the season 1 finale of Beer Time with Books.
Woo woo woo! Pew, 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 pew.
We're still in the early stages of the pod. We do not have a soundboard. The soundboard
is Jamie.
is your lovely hosts.
Yeah.
But we're excited to be back pretty quickly after the last episode because we had given some of the giveaway rules that we were going to have for the season finale. We just thought we've had such a good time reading the books over the last year for season 1 that we wanted to let somebody else experience that as well. So we have a giveaway. We're going to give away 2 books for the season 1 giveaway here. And as we mentioned last episode for the rules, it's going to be name a beer that we drank. So that wouldn't count any of the like mixed drinks or whatever. No LaCroix. I know there was one LaCroix episode. No wine. It's got to be name a beer and then also name one of the 7 books that we read that you would like to receive. And so how this is going to work is this episode is going to drop on Brian's Book Bastion, and then you have a week to submit from the day that it gets submitted, and then we'll randomly draw from there.
With a comment.
Yeah, with a comment on the YouTube channel. So this will be maybe the last time that it happens that way because we're going to be on some real podcasting services for next season.
Woo.
And hopefully this season will be up on some as well here pretty soon. So again, it's just name a beer, name the book you want on the channel in a comment, and after a week, we'll find some way to randomize it and maybe do a short video or something. I think that'd be kind of fun for like the 3 of us to get on camera, even for like a 2-minute thing, just be like, hey, we're the hosts. Little teaser for next season.
Brian is running this past us for the
On
first
the
time.
air.
Look, we're
live on the air.
This is a loose episode. Let's go.
I guess we're doing that. Yeah.
Sure. No, that sounds great.
That's fine.
Well, I also think it'd just be nice for some people that maybe haven't seen us in person, just kind of like put the voice to a face.
Well, right.
You've seen
They've
pictures.
seen our pictures.
I know that, but like, which one of your voices is which
Which
picture?
one is Brian married to?
Yeah.
That's the question.
It's just like, so it'd just be interesting.
That is the question of this podcast.
It would be interesting to kind of do that. So that'll be fun. And we'll be taking a short break after this is over. Season 2 will be dropping maybe like late January, early February. But we're glad you've stuck with us thus far. It's been a good time. So to kick off, before we get into some of the discussions for season 1 of some of our favorite and least favorite moments of the pod, moments, books, etc., we're going to do a classic What Are You Drinking? The final What Are You Drinking of season 1 of Beer Time with Books. Who would like to start?
I'll start. I'm drinking an Avery Brewing White Rascal, Belgian-style white ale. It's delicious.
Yeah, we all have a different beer today. This is Brian. I am drinking a Tank 7, a classic apparently.
Classic for you.
I've had a few episodes with a Tank 7, bringing it back for the season finale.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I am drinking Odell Brewing Isolation Ale, which is a winter seasonal and a winter classic.
A winter
It is a winter classic.
And I'm
winter seasonal. Nay,
I'm halfway
a
through
winter
it,
classic.
And I started drinking it like 5 minutes ago.
Also same.
Hey,
So-
we're like I said, we're
It's
getting
fine.
we're getting a loose episode here.
It's Saturday. We're getting a little loosey-goosey.
This is late night with Beer Time with Books.
This is late
This
night.
may be the latest we've ever recorded an episode. As of like 10:30 at night, we're just like, oh wow,
I mean,
really pushing it.
comparatively.
It is late.
So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and kick off a couple of these discussions here. We have a few categories that we're gonna go through. I'll just talk about just 3 of them for now, and we have a couple bonus ones at the end that you'll want to stick around for a couple of reasons. We'll mention why when we get there. But the first 3 categories that we're going to be talking about, it's going to be our least favorite book that we read, on the podcast.
Contentious.
I already feel like I know the answer for that. And then we're also going to be going around talking about our top 3 books that we read on the podcast. And I do like the addition of this third category after talking about our top 3, because I think it could yield some interesting discussions. But we'll be going on who was our favorite character in any of the books that we read for this season. So we'll go ahead and kick it off here with this first category of the least favorite book. I figured we'd work with the negatives and make our way forward. So we're going to go around and see what everybody has to say. So who wants to start on this one? Least favorite book. Everybody's coughing. I don't know.
Let me gear up for this.
I know what Danny and I's answer is, but I don't know what yours is.
I don't know what yours is either, actually.
Yeah. Well,
I'll
should
go.
I start? Okay, yeah.
No, I'll go.
Go ahead, yeah.
My least favorite was Vineland.
Wow,
Shocker.
dude, crazy.
But honestly,
who would have known?
I was trying to like rate them or like rank them rather, and like I don't know what another like close least favorite would be, and that sounds bad, but I think it's more at like about the way that I feel about all of the other books rather than like thinking that Vineland was actually shit. I didn't think that it was shit, but
Yeah.
I just didn't enjoy it as much as the other ones that we read.
We really did have a great list of books for this season, because I was trying to go through even not even just for the least favorite, but even for the top 3. It was so hard to choose because there were so many that I even recall in previous discussions being like, this is incredible, like modern classic, whatever. I mean, me being hyperbolic anyway.
Yeah. You
at the
love
end of
everything.
I do, but like it was definitely very hard. So yeah, Vineland, no shock there.
Do you want to give like a quick elevator pitch as to why you didn't like it?
Yeah, even just like a sentence or two.
I mean, it was just like really hard for me to follow, and that, as we have learned over the course of this podcast, is like number one, like if I don't understand what's happening like within reason, like it's hard for me to think that it's good because I don't know, it's just hard for me to follow. But yeah, I think all of the like jumping around like time, like in the different times without a ton of structure was hard for me.
Yeah, it was very seamless transitions.
And like we talked about, I mean, too seamless. Actually, there were no transitions. So
Arguably.
I agreed with you.
And as
And
I have
then I
done with
took it
every
back.
Vineland discussion, these are all arguable
Allegedly.
points. These are all arguable points.
Whatever. There were 0 transitions in Vineland.
Whatever.
It was just a stream of consciousness, even though it took place in like 10 different times. Anyway, as we talked about in the episode about Vineland also, I just didn't care about anybody, and that was hard for me.
So, spoiler, your favorite character isn't from Vineland.
Yeah.
It's really not from
Wow,
Vineland because
also-
I don't know any of them.
Well, so is yours the same?
My least favorite book is also Vineland,
Okay.
but for very different reasons.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, Vineland by Thomas Pynchon. I will give
bring his name into it. Let's just make sure
I
it's
will-
Call
very,
him out.
very
I would
clear.
like to clarify though that
Cancel
like
him.
I have different reasons, and I will give his writing another go. Like I don't.
Oh, me too. I agree with that.
Yeah, like I didn't absolutely hate it. It wasn't the worst book I've ever read. I feel like compared to the other books that we read, I kept being disappointed throughout the reading of it. Like there were also moments where I was confused, and you can hear that on the episode for that book. But the reason that I really, really didn't like it at the end was because there were a bunch of moments, like plot lines, that I would start to enjoy, and then they would just be cut off and never continued.
Yeah.
Like the parts of the book that I did care about didn't get fleshed out,
Yeah.
which was just really disappointing to me. So that's my reasoning, is that I could have liked it if it had been a different trajectory in like the second half.
Yeah, and as I had said on the episode, I think a lot of Thomas Pynchon's other novels, they do similar things.
Yeah.
And so that makes me semi-worried about your enjoyment of it to give it another go, but I also really believe that anytime he does any stylistic thing that was found in Vineland, it's just done better in his other books. Like I've just
That's encouraging.
And so, I'll say it again just in case people haven't heard that episode. Maybe this is somebody's first episode because it's an easy wrap up.
Welcome.
But yeah, welcome to BTWB. But I just think that it is his worst book. It's not.
And our worst.
It's not my least. It's not my least favorite, but it also spoiler didn't make it to my top 3 either. So.
I figured.
And so for me, my least favorite was actually the tension. You guys are looking.
You
at
like everything, so I don't
Bravo.
know.
Yeah, I really don't know what yours is.
My least favorite is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
All right.
Okay, that's
Um,
kind of what I was expecting.
H2G2, as we had decided upon on those episodes. And I don't think that it was one that I just straight up didn't like. It was, again, a similar idea that Danny had brought, that we just read so many good books that there just had to be one to choose for this list.
Yeah.
I really remember enjoying Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy a lot. I remember it was a quick read. I remember I laughed. There was a lot of humor in it. I just think a lot of the other books that we chose for this season were way more down my style alley.
Yeah.
Almost
Hitchhikers
all of them.
would be my second least favorite.
Yeah.
Mine too.
It was the most different from
Yeah.
all the ones we read. I felt like there were, even with Vineland, there were like a lot of ties to other things that we read, and it just felt like H2G2 was the outlier of the season.
Yeah.
And I think I had said I'd be willing to read more from that series, and that may still be true, but I think that that's really low down on my priority list of,
I mean, if
of
they're
continuing
if
on.
it's like fast
And funny,
would
like
read
that's
a
why it
second
would
one.
still
I
be
feel like
interesting.
I, in the episode, described it as like an airplane book. Like, if
Yeah.
I'm on a long airplane and I grab the second one, I'm sure I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think that too. I just think that I don't even know if it's necessarily like a science fiction aspect of it. There was just something about it that was too.
Too,
Like-
like slapstick or.
Well, it was just too easy through the plot. Like
Yeah.
everything was just so perfect of like, oh, they were about to die, and then oh, they got shot out of their ship, and this escape pod at the
It was a
perfect
little
moment, and then all of a
contrived.
sudden they went to here,
Yeah.
there, and like it did make the story flow a lot because every single chapter was just kind of like, well, this other crazy event happened, and then it leads you into the next action of it. But I think I need more complexity than that a little bit. So I'd say that that's my choice, but again, not that it was a bad book. I really did enjoy it, but I'd say it was my least one for the pod for season 1. And so with that, we're going to be moving into, I had my notes showing there. Got to keep my cards
wasn't
close to my
reading
chest.
it.
We're going to be going around doing our top 3 books, and we thought it'd be kind of fun. Jamie and I had talked about this a little bit earlier to do
Is this a coup?
kind of in a round, or like a
Round robin?
going around and doing every person's third choice, every person's second choice, and every person's first choice. So we kind of have a build up, and it gives everybody a chance to say their piece about each of the books. And so since Danny, you had done the least favorite, do you want to go ahead and start with your third pick? Is that
I
cool, or do you want somebody else to start?
I start. I'll start.
Okay, so this will be your third place book for your top 3 on
Third-
season 1.
Third place is Bluebeard.
Wow.
I am very surprised.
Oh my
by that.
God, I am too.
I do this. I read books and rate them immediately, and then I take like a few months and I feel differently about them.
I was very much feeling that way for choosing all of these. I was like, I think my ratings are off for what I'm gonna say today.
Yeah, and but I feel that way about all of my ratings all the time because I don't wait to rate them immediately after I finish it. But I have very fond feelings about most of the books that we read, even though I wasn't in love with all of them. So when I was doing this, I was just like, what are ratings? What is liking a book? Why do I like books?
Oh my God, we're gonna do a podcast essay. What does
In
it
this
mean to
essay,
like a book?
I don't know. I feel this way a lot. Like like reading, like I've read a few books recently where like I hated the characters but I liked the writing, and I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to, how am I supposed to rate this? The characters were shitty people and I hated them, but I really liked the writing. So anyway, I was on a tangent trying to like figure out what my faves and non-faves were, but what led me to putting Bluebeard on my top 3 was actually realizing that, can I spoil?
Yeah.
Can I spoil the next
We'll
segment?
just say the
We'll
spoiler
say
warning
spoiler
starts
alert. Yeah.
Well,
now. I suppose.
I mean, just that like 2 of my favorite characters are from Bluebeard.
Okay.
And so I was like,
are we gonna see a return for a later discussion? or
well, I
something?
mean, yeah, I was like, that's interesting that I feel that way about these characters. And then I returned to realizing that I think I liked Bluebeard better than I rated it immediately after reading it. But also, this is a plug for Goodreads to freaking put half stars.
the half star
I
argument
need
returns.
nuance.
Yeah, those discussions also for Bluebeard were really good. I recall. I enjoyed those discussions a lot. It seemed like it was all pretty amicable, but we also had a lot of points that we brought up to each other that gave a lot of new perspective to each of us. I think I thought it was a good discussion.
Yeah, I was re-listening to the first Bluebeard episode earlier today in preparation for this episode.
Yeah, those were good eps.
Yeah. So are we moving on to your third choice?
My number
Jamie's
3.
third choice.
Are we ready?
I,
It's also Bluebeard.
oh,
All
let's
right.
go, dude.
Yeah. I mean, like, I love Vonnegut so much, and there is something really special about that book. I don't know how to just I have a similar just like fondness for it. Like, I'm just like, oh, that was such a pleasant reading experience, and the plot was so cohesive. I liked how, like we talked about, it was one of Vonnegut's more like somber novels.
Mm-hmm.
But it still had his quirks and humor in it. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. And I actually, as I was going through, like, trying to figure out what my top 3 were going to be, on Goodreads, I rated 4 of our 7 books with 5 stars. So I had to decide out of those 4 which 3
Gotta cut it out.
were the top. And also, my Goodreads is like, I feel like Danny, you are much more harsh with your Goodreads ratings than I am. Like, I really, if I enjoyed reading a book, like, I don't care if the writing wasn't perfect, or like, if I enjoyed the experience and I came out of it feeling good and happy, or like sad because it was a sad book, then I probably give it 5 stars. 4 stars is like, I enjoyed it, but it took me a long time to get through it, and blah blah blah. So yeah, I don't know. Those are my reasonings for Bluebeard. We kind of, we talked about it. We'll talk about it more later.
I also,
Yeah.
I recall also, I don't remember when this happened in the sequence of our podcast, but I rated Bluebeard, I think 3 stars, and then I got shit for it, and then
3 stars is mean.
Well,
That's
and then
harsh.
See, but have we talked about my rating system on Goodreads,
I
because
think
you
we
guys
have in
have
the past,
inflated
No,
comparatively to
Yeah,
mine.
definitely.
when you hover over the stars on Goodreads, it gives you like
What they
that
say
means.
it would be.
On in the app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
And-
know.
Well, more on the computer.
More on the computer.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
I
the
don't do. I've
desktop.
never. That's interesting because I've never done it.
So,
I don't do it on my computer.
According to Goodreads, a 3-star review is it was okay. And then 4 stars is like I enjoyed it, and then 5 stars is like it was really amazing.
I don't disagree with that, actually. I feel like I feel that way about, like, I read, I don't know, I feel like I feel that way about a lot of books. Like, I'm like, yeah, this was this was fine. I'm missing this was fine, and I really enjoyed this book. I want something in between.
Yeah.
Because between fine and I really enjoyed is like a part thing that I am missing.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to get at was I did rate it 3 stars, and then we talked about it like later, and I changed my rating to 4 stars. And I think also that it's my highest. My favorite Vonnegut book out of the 5 that I've read, which also I think I noted on the podcast on the previous episode, but. Anyway, check out my non-existent booktube channel for more waxing poetic about Goodreads reviews and their system.
Brian?
So I just want to have a disclaimer first that, like, just because we kind of already touched on it, but I really feel like this top 3 could change at any time for me because a lot of the books that we like. But this is how I'm feeling today.
Disclaimer.
This is how I'm feeling today. So for my number 3, it's Northwest by Zadie Smith.
All right.
And we had talked about it a little bit on the last couple episodes. This was our most recent book, and so also I have a pretty significant recency effect anyway for a lot of
Acknowledging your recency bias.
my recency bias.
You think you're more intelligent
it's
than we
definitely
are?
there. But yeah, with Northwest, I just think a lot of the books I had been reading for a while were really more focused on an era I never lived in. I was reading a lot of novels that were from the 60s and 70s in particular, especially the last couple of years. I think that would be the vast majority of the books that I read would be taking place within those 2 decades, if not within the novel itself. Then it would be with the author actually writing within those decades. And so reading Northwest and getting a perspective of characters that were living within an era that felt familiar, having them experience problems, like I said, with technology, with like relating to one another, with globalization, with all of these various topics, it just felt really nice to have that to relate to. I think there was a lot in previous eras that you could relate to on a very human level, but just having something that was really on the nose to a lot of stuff that I've experienced, I thought it was really nice to read about, and I liked the characters a lot. I liked the structure a lot. The changing in the different sections to match each character, I thought was really well done. And especially with like Leah's section, I really, really enjoyed. I liked the structure of that, and I liked her perspective on things. I liked how kind of all over the place the text was on the page in certain instances when she was really feeling lost. There was just a lot of it that I think it didn't always feel like it was just experimental for experimental's sake. It really felt like a lot of those experimental strategies that she'd employed were really on the nose and were really well done. So I think that was my number 3.
Sweet.
I don't think that it will make your guys' top 3, but we will.
Northwest would have been my 4th.
4th?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was the 4th one that I rated 5 stars, but I was debating between Northwest and Bluebeard for the 3rd spot, and I was so much more satisfied with the ending of Bluebeard than with the ending of Northwest.
Yeah. And that's fair. The ending of Bluebeard was
It's so
incredible.
good. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll go ahead and go around with the number 2 choice now.
All right.
Danny, we'll throw it back to you.
My second was Underground Railroad.
Nice.
Um,
I've been so curious because we both were guessing each other's. Jamie and I were guessing each other's all today. And we both kept telling each other, we're like, what is Danny's list going to be?
I feel like I do that a lot. Well, I need to like ruminate on books almost like after I read them because with Underground I really I just really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed like the fictionalized aspect of the actual Underground Railroad that he created, and also this may be influenced by reading a second book of his called The Intuitionists that I read a few weeks ago.
I think it does make a difference.
I mean, I really enjoyed The Intuitionist was weirder. It felt a little more surreal, but it was still really interesting, and I understood his voice I think much better after finishing a second book of his. It gave me a little more context. which is one of the reasons that I think it's now rated so highly for me on this podcast. Yeah, I don't know. I just really enjoyed his voice throughout the entire book, and also the characters. I mean, I really loved Cora, and
Yeah, she was fantastic.
she was a phenomenal character, and I liked almost everything about the book, so it is high on my list.
Cool.
My second choice is also the Underground Railroad.
Oh.
We choose. I think we might have the exact.
I think
same
we have the
top
same
three.
list.
Yeah, I similar things. Like I loved the characters in the Underground Railroad. I felt really engaged with that book. I feel like a lot of my top three has to do with like how much I wanted to keep reading it. Because like I get tired, and sometimes reading can feel like a chore. But with the three that I chose, it didn't feel like I was like slogging through them. It felt like I wanted to keep reading, and I wanted to know what happened.
Yeah.
So we talked about when we were reading the Underground Railroad that even though it's a very sad story and deals with a lot of like true historical things that are problematic and difficult to talk about, it was still a page turner, and that is just kind of like masterful writing, I think. So that was also my number 2.
Yeah, especially in a novel that had so many changes of scenery
Yeah.
as well, to continue to create a compelling story in the different states that they travel to, in the different circumstances, some that were more brutal than others. It never felt like any of those states was like a dip in the story.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times when you change settings or you go to a new character's perspective, you feel like, oh, I really want to go back to that other thing. Like, this is fine, I get it, but I want to go back to the other thing. But I didn't feel that way. And
Yeah, the momentum stayed for
Yeah.
sure. Cool. Well, we got 2 Underground Railroads for number 2.
Are we going to get a third one?
My number 2 is 100 Years of Solitude.
Ooh.
Interesting.
So this was one that it took us a long time to read. I think
That would have been my number 4.
there were some circumstances. Yeah,
Been my number 5.
there were.
For a full list of rankings, please see.
So we read it over a long period of time, and I think that actually helped my enjoyment of that novel quite a bit, just because there was so much to absorb there, going through 7 generations of the Buendias. I just think it was nice to be able to slow down and get a feel for each one. I know they didn't all get their own equal amount of time, because certain people, like Ursula, for instance, she was alive forever. And certain other Buendias were also alive for much longer than others. And then when you got to the final generation, that part of the story was pretty quick by comparison, and also just they died pretty quickly too, because that's just how the family tree was always supposed to end. But I did like the aspect of tying in a lot of history into the novel in a very fantastical way. And I just think that the Buendia family was really well done, in that there was the similar names of the characters, and there was a reason as to why you saw a lot of similar traits as you went down the family tree. Just to write something of that scope and have it become the classic that it has would be incredibly difficult, but I feel like it was done really well here, and I'm very excited to see the Netflix series whenever it comes
Yeah,
out, because I
man.
still
When is
am
it?
completely
Supposed to-
baffled when that is
No idea.
Oh, we don't know.
when
I
that's
don't
going
know
to
if
come
they've
out.
announced like a date.
No, they just said it was in production.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I-
just the
I am
casting of the
really
whole
excited,
family,
yeah.
like it's just going to
It'll
be
be
so
interesting.
so fascinating, and like even some of the scenes, like with the massacre, like how they handle
Yeah.
that too, and something that like within the story was such a mystery to other people, even though it was such a big deal. for those that saw it. It would just I just am curious how they'll do it, but I just thought there was so much about this story that even though it was kind of going off in so many directions, it was so grand. I really got lost in that world, and the world was built in such a good way. With Macondo and everything, like there was just I just thought it was crafted so well.
I would like to make a side note that I think that part of the reason 100 Years of Solitude is not higher up on my list is because I had already read it. Like,
That's
it
fair.
was a second reading for me, and honestly, I kind of keep forgetting that we read it for the podcast because, like, I loved it so much in college, but going back to it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a big book. I'm gonna read it again. Like,
And keep track of all the characters
yeah.
again.
So
I remember Danny
I had a family tree.
wrestling with the family
do love
tree and
that
keeping
book.
it
It's
in
an amazing book.
keeping
Yeah.
it in line. So anyway, that was my number 2. I really enjoyed it. So
top spot.
we're getting to the top
spot,
spot
baby.
here, number 1.
I
it.
suspect Jamie and I have the same list.
This will be crazy.
Yeah, I think so.
My top spot is Lincoln in the Bardo.
Same.
We really set the bar high with Lincoln. I mean, I agree with Jamie's point about my top 3 books are all books that I was so invested in the story, I almost couldn't put them down. I was excited to go back to read them. And I mean, with like Hitchhikers and Northwest, at least the second half of Northwest, it was harder for me to be excited about picking them up and reading them. And Lincoln, I read just so quickly. I was like frustrated that we had to stop at the first half because I read through it so quickly, and I think I even reread the first
I recall, yeah.
third of the book because just because I wanted it to make more sense, but it was just so enjoyable, and I mean it was quick, but I've never read anything like it, and I think that plays a part too. I think it was really interestingly written, and I don't know. I am just really intrigued by the whole. I would like read it again. I feel like, and I don't feel that way about many books, especially like reading the same book in the same year. But I would read it again, just because I don't know. It was such a different kind of story. So yeah. I enjoyed it a lot.
And that was the most popular export of our podcast as well. We've gotten more people to read Lincoln in the Bardo than anything else.
Yeah, we've had mixed reviews a little bit from
There have
the
been mixed
people
reviews,
we've
but-
suggested it to. But it is interesting to me, Danny, that us having the same top 3 was surprising to me.
It also is surprising
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
surprising to me also.
But also, I don't know, like based off of us, like our discussions during Lincoln in the Bardo, it doesn't shock me that it's your top book, but it does surprise me just in general knowing you and your reading habits, because like we've discussed on the podcast that like structural things sometimes you get frustrated with, and it is such a weird book.
Yeah.
And so I am surprised that you weren't more frustrated with it than you were.
It's definitely an exception to my rule, but also like I reread. I did have to reread part of the first.
I mean, I did
half.
too. I reread like the first 5
And I
chapters.
think the difference is that I don't always have the patience to do that. And even in like 100 Years of Solitude, I was just like, oh my God, I might as well not even try. And this was really interesting because we even after we like recorded the first episode, I went back and like, I don't know, it just informed the way that I went back and kind of reread a little bit. But I agree. I was a little surprised myself that I liked it so much because I don't gravitate toward books like that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's my top choice for a lot of the same reasons. I really loved the characters in Lincoln in the Bardo. Like, I feel like the characterization was so well done, and I was so attached to even like really minor characters in that story.
And even making Lincoln himself like such a good character
And like very
in that
human
book
and real
was really
and-
impressive.
Yeah.
It was like almost. I mean, it was like you could almost characterize that book as historical fiction in a
It has
a little bit.
citations in it. Like
yeah,
it is.
yeah.
It
that
is
may or may not be true,
Well,
as we found out.
historical fiction.
Done on purpose,
Um,
obviously, but
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a book that like kind of haunts me, and that's maybe a funny way to say it because it's about ghosts. Huh? But I think about it all the time. Like I genuinely think about like sections of that book all the time, and we read it a year ago.
Yeah.
So that's impressive. And go George Saunders. I've read nothing else by him.
Yeah, I think there's one specifically that's called out on the front cover, 10th of December.
10th of
or something.
December.
That I'd
I
be
think that's a
curious
short
to read.
story
Yeah,
collection.
it is because this
Yeah.
is his first novel.
Yeah.
Lincoln in the Bardo might be one of my like top books of all time. I think.
I love that book.
I do too.
It is so good.
You're welcome, y'all.
All right. Let's sit down.
That was a Brian choice.
We know.
Um,
The audience knows.
Underground Railroad was my choice, and Danny and I both loved it.
Yeah.
So.
well, that
I didn't
leads-
love my choice, but
that-
that's fine.
That leads to my number one choice here, and my number one choice is The Underground Railroad.
Oh.
All right.
That book was amazing. I think I had even said on the episode that I thought it was. I think I did use the word masterpiece. Like I normally for all of the books really liked them, but I really thought that it was a masterpiece, and there was just so many aspects of it that made it feel like it reached the heights of a lot of the other classics that have made their way into the literary canon. Even from the first sentence, I'm going to grab it real quick. It's right next to me, just to pull it out.
You could have asked Danny, but
I could have grabbed it for you.
Um,
It was closer to me.
But it was just like, this was one of those instances where the first sentence is singled out on its own. It was the first time Caesar approached Cora about running north. She said no. And that just packs so much into one sentence and kind of sets up the whole journey. And also just the structure of the novel itself, as I had mentioned on that episode, was just so well done with alternating between the states that Cora goes to and then shorter sections about certain characters that we maybe had just read about or were on people's mind, or just some detail that we needed to know. And again, as we had mentioned previously, none of the states had a dip in that forward momentum, and each of those short stories almost could operate as such outside of the novel. Like there was so much packed within those shorter sections that was so compelling just on their own, but the fact that it even led into more emotionally impactful parts of the next chapter, or really adding a note of finality to the previous chapter, the more I thought about it as I was trying to figure out what my top three was, I couldn't find much fault in it. And I just remember, even when reading it, you just felt like there was something special there. And I'm a sucker for historical fiction, and I really enjoyed that this did focus on a lot of real things, but I also did like the aspect of making the Underground Railroad a real train. It just added more of a fast-paced aspect to the story, and made it feel like it was even more grand because of this actual object that they were all searching for. But I really, really liked it, and I would definitely recommend everyone reading it. And even for you guys put it at your number 2. It was a fantastic
Read
book.
it.
I am surprised that Lincoln in the Bardo is not in your top 3.
Me too.
Like I am genuinely surprised. I thought it would be like maybe number 3 or something.
It was
for
tough.
you.
It was very tough to
Is it
choose.
in your top 4?
I don't think so.
Whoa.
Oh shit.
So we'll get to that. We're going to go to the next section, and we'll have a little bit more discussions here, which I think will be a little bit more illuminating. But those are our top 3. I'm glad to know that, though, and that really does blow my mind that you guys have the same list.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
cool.
fascinated by that, because this is not like, this is genuinely, we both didn't talk about it.
Yeah,
at
we
all.
haven't discussed this beforehand, but
Uh,
also I'm regularly surprised by my own Goodreads ratings when I go back and look at them. So just take all of my things with a grain of salt.
Yeah, well, with that, now that we've gone through the top 3, that leads to the last announced section that we had said at the beginning and that is, what was your favorite character during this first season? So that could be any character in any of the 7 books that we read. And I think that this was a section we weren't initially going to do, but I think, Danny, you had initially suggested, and I think that it is kind of an interesting thing to add, just because, as you had even said, for certain books that you had really maybe not liked as much, you still had characters that you enjoyed so much, and that made your rating of the books that much more difficult. And so us discussing favorite characters as well, I think will help for certain people, just to kind of add some depth to books that didn't get as much love in the top 3. So we'll go ahead and start with you for your favorite character here.
Yeah, I think discussing favorite characters adds like a little bit of nuance, because you don't always have to, like, your favorite characters, don't always have to be from your favorite books necessarily.
Yeah.
That said, my favorite characters did inform which books made my top 3. And I put both, my most memorable for sure were Raybo Karabakian and Cersei Berman. I
fantastic
greatly enjoyed both of them. I also drew a weird parallel. Maybe nobody sees this. Between Cersei Berman and in Northwest, who is the ex person of Felix? What is her name?
The older
girl
in the attic. What is her name?
Cersei Berman, and then her, and then as an extension of that, the the character trope of Breakfast at Tiffany's. What's her name in Breakfast at Tiffany's?
That you had mentioned that
brought
during
it up
the
in
Northwest, yeah.
And then once also this is informed by, I read Breakfast at Tiffany's recently, so it made me think of this, but I like the same imagery popped into my head when I read Felix visiting this old ex-girlfriend or whoever it was, and then also Cersei Berman just kind of coming in and taking over Raybo's life a little bit and just being like, no, this is how you're gonna do it, kind of in like a crazy way. She's kind of like a little unhinged in ways. And
what was the first question? Was like, how did your parents die or something?
Yeah. Like she's
like what a start.
She's very invasive, and like it reminds me a lot of both the character in Northwest and also in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Like I couldn't, once I like
very brazen, and
once I made that connection, and also they're all like women who are being brazen in like kind of like a time where like women aren't really supposed to be brazen, although in Northwest it's a little different. But I kind of feel like they're both just kind of like whatever. I picture them just like draped over a chair, like in a robe holding a cigarette. Like I don't know, I just kind of like, I feel like I liked Raybo and Cersei as a pair a lot, and Cora from Underground was a close second for me.
So I discovered something about myself when thinking about
Whoa.
Do tell.
favorite characters, because
this podcast
are you about
really
to talk about character development?
I mean, a little bit, but not really. But I've talked about in other episodes that my favorite thing about a book, about an author's style, is like how they develop their characters, and I really latch on to characters in every novel that I would say that in every single book that we read, even my least favorite book, I had a character who I really liked. Like, and I think that there are good things about all of them. But also, when trying to judge who my favorite character was, a lot of it went to me being like, who would I want to hang out with? Like, who is
Ridgeway.
who's really appealing to me?
Okay.
It's
Okay. No, but like I found that the characters that I am drawn to are generally curmudgeonly old men.
That doesn't surprise me.
Right.
So the characters who came to I would say that my first favorite was also Raybo, from Bluebeard, because he is just like, he's so flawed, but he recognizes it in a lot of ways. And he just seems like he's trying. and I don't know how else to describe that, but he is just like an old man who's been through a lot of things, and he sucks, and he kind of knows that he sucks, but like he's trying to affect the world in good ways. Like the reveal of the painting in the potato barn at the end is just such a beautiful thing about his character. And then like my close seconds for top character are this also curmudgeonly old men in Lincoln and the Bardo, the two like main narrators.
Yeah.
I
love them a lot.
Hans Volman and Roger Bevins III. Because I think I maybe in the episode described them as like the old men from the Muppets. And I just love them. I just like want to be around them and hear them comment on everything. I don't know.
I want their commentary like in my head.
Yeah, like they're just so sassy, but like also caring. There's something like they are trying to nurture Willie throughout that book, and they're just nice. I don't know. Those are my favorite characters, though.
Yeah. So that leaves me. My favorite character, which now hearing your guys' is fantastic, but Raybo Karabekian.
Oh, all right.
He was my favorite, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about it, because I did feel bad about not having Bluebeard in the top 3, and this also brings back another point that one of you brought up. I can't remember who it was, about I think it was you, Danny, for Colson Whitehead, but reading an author's work aside from the one that you're already reading can inform it, and I absolutely adored Bluebeard. I'd say that that's probably my 4th choice. I feel like if I would have read it in isolation, it probably would have been a lot higher.
Yeah.
Because I've read so many Vonnegut novels at this point, some that are some of my top of all time. And so just in comparison to that, it affected it going up the ranks anyway. But this was a similar deal for me with Bluebeard as it was for me with God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, where I loved Mr. Rosewater as a character and didn't necessarily think that was one of Kurt Vonnegut's best books. But I think Kurt Vonnegut really has such a skill, even within the absurdity of his novels, to create such good characters that even when the novels don't reach the highs of even his own classics, like with Slaughterhouse-Five, he can still create somebody that you can just absolutely adore. And with Raybo, that was definitely the case, where again, he was flawed, he knew it, but he
was trying.
But and it helped so much that it was an autobiography of him, where he was even calling himself out as he wrote, or not even shying away from telling the audience that Cersei just called him out.
Right,
writing that
he
into
was like, it's true.
writing that into his own documentary, where like he would have
suck.
like he was just writing something, she just saw it, she called him out on it, and then he immediately puts it into his own autobiography. There's just so much to love there. And then, as you had mentioned, Jamie, that his ending of eventually coming around and having that big reveal of now it's the women's turn, I believe was what the painting was called, and his explanation of it, and him being able to go through and really just pinpoint out every single person and just be like, I took the time. I wanted to create art that meant something. It wasn't just, for money. It wasn't a collector's thing. It was, I see the backstory of this person. These are people in my life. These are people I made up. It was just the care that he put into it was amazing. And so I wish that I could have put Bluebeard higher, but again, just other Vonnegut works, I think, created a bias for me. But
I think Bluebeard's in my top 3 Vonnegut also.
And that's what I'm also saying, is I feel like my ratings could change over time, but Bluebeard was a fantastic novel, and Raybo was far and away my favorite character from this season. And just as a side note, I'd say Cora was also a close second to me, and also just because that was my first choice for books, and a lot of that is due to Cora being such a strong main character. I'd say that she really drove a lot of that novel as well. So I'd say that would be my choice, and I'm very glad to get that insight for you guys, because we all kind of kept it pretty isolated to the discussions that we were having, but it's kind of cool to wrap back around And we really did read some like world-class novels for season one. It made it very hard.
We did a good job, guys.
Very
We
hard to
did do a good
choose.
job. Can I add a category?
Okay.
Off the cuff.
Really quick.
Sure.
On the air. Do you guys want to say what your favorite books outside of the podcast were this year?
I
Or
could.
no.
I could look through.
I mean, if you don't have, or like anything that comes to mind, I'm just curious because we did talk a lot about other things we were like media we were consuming during this podcast, and other books we were reading, and so I thought it would be interesting to.
I can start with that really quickly
Yeah.
because it adds on to my point before of loving curmudgeonly old men.
Is it? I know what it is.
I just finished, and it's probably because I just finished it like a week ago, and it's still in my mind. But A Man Called Uva.
I loved that book.
It is like
Haven't read it yet, so don't spoil too much.
it is not. Put this in my Goodreads review. It's not a groundbreaking novel in any way. It's pretty straightforward. It's kind of like a cliched story of like unlikely friends.
But it's so sweet.
Really well done, and it's really sweet. And the main character, Uva, is a curmudgeonly old man. And I sobbed at the end of that book.
Yeah.
Like there were like 3 different parts in the last 5 chapters that I cried at. And it was great. It's like there's just like nice character development again throughout that novel of him like learning to be a human in the world, and it's nice. So if you want to read A Man Called Uva, I cannot think of the author's name. Frederick something.
Bachman.
Frederick Bachman.
I also loved that book.
It's a pretty easy read.
I loved it.
I listened to the audiobook, but I did really enjoy it, and I don't know if that's maybe my top from the year, but it is the one on my mind right now, so
Cool.
I'll say that.
For me, I do want to give a shout out to 2. One of them was Dubliners by James Joyce. I started that in Dublin when we were on our honeymoon. But it was amazing that was my first James Joyce novel, and I guess it's not a novel, it's a short story collection, but it was my first James Joyce reading experience, and he has a reputation of being very difficult to read, and I think that knowing what I know about some of his later works, some of that is well earned, but with Dubliners, it was so surprising to see how easy it was to read in a lot of cases.
Because it's one of his early
And it is early, and it allows it to not have his ideas just go sprawling out into infinity because they are very well contained. But being able to write from the perspective of so many different people, and just having just been in Dublin and being able to picture some of it and some of the places that we had visited, and after learning what we had learned about Dublin, it was amazing to have an experience that was that enjoyable and not that dense. And I really thought that was a great collection, and anybody that's scared to try out James Joyce, that one would definitely be worth giving a go. And then I just finished recently The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which so many people have read, obviously. But that was a phenomenal novel, and it's one that, as I've mentioned, I like to think of the context, because there's certain books that when you think of the time period that they were written in, add so much more to your overall enjoyment or understanding of the novel. And just the fact that this one was written in the time period that it was released in 1963 at the very beginning, and some of the subject matter that's in there is just so taboo, and it would have been so brave to write about. And even given the context of her committing suicide very soon after, just adds to the power of that novel. But it was incredible, and I was very glad to have read that as well. So those were definitely 2 highlights from the year for me.
Okay. I didn't rate a ton of books 5 stars this year, but one of the ones that I did was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And honestly, I didn't know what to expect because I read The Goldfinch and I liked it. I thought it was pretty good, but The Secret History was like very complex and full of very interesting characters, and they're all very well developed. It's a long book, but I mean it's a long book, but the characters are all very well developed. And even the plot is interesting. It's almost like a mystery, kind of like The Goldfinch. Like it's a mystery, but also like a social commentary, like all rolled into one. And so I really enjoyed it. It took me a while, but I really savored every part of that book. And it was definitely a book that I couldn't wait to keep reading. Sometimes with like longer, denser books, I get a little tired and weary. But
Tired and weary.
I do. I get both. But with this one, I was like very excited to keep reading it. And I didn't really get tired of it. It was really interesting. So I can't recommend that book enough. And I have one more that I wanted to recommend. What was the other one I wanted to recommend? Circe by Madeline Miller. I also really loved that book.
I have that downloaded as an audiobook. I was thinking about
I would actually listen to it as an audiobook as like after reading it as a book, because I don't know, I really liked it. I think I probably described it as this earlier on the podcast, but it reads like Greek mythology, like fanfic, and I loved it. I like read it in like a few days. I thought it was really different. I've never read anything like that. So both of those are really high on my list for the year.
Well, nice little insight into our side reading habits. We read outside the pod, y'all.
We do.
But just bring it back to the last couple bonus sections here. One of those may have been worth your while if you're trying to go for this giveaway here. This is Beer Time with Books, and we would be remiss to not talk about the beer in Beer Time with Books. So we're going to talk about favorite beer. This can just be a very brief section, but Danny compiled...
go in depth.
Yeah, just, well, the mouthfeel.
The mouthfeel. The flavor profile
on
was
the back
really...
of your tongue.
The front was interesting, and then as it progressed...
The back was also interesting.
Interesting is what I'm getting.
So Danny had compiled a full list of what we drank on the podcast. Very formal list here. It has the date. It has the time. It was
I don't know what kind of context you guys wanted.
So we have some beers that everybody drank and other drinks for every episode. Upon looking at the list, did you all notice any patterns that surprised you? And also, was there one that was a very particular good beer that you had this time around?
Are we exporting this file with data? Like, what?
Oh, man.
What was a pattern?
What are the patterns that you noticed?
Like
One pattern that I noticed
like
is
did a
that
beer come back around?
I had the most diverse drinking habits.
Yeah.
In that I had a Michelob Ultra, a LaCroix, and some wine.
Among the other beers, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't notice any patterns. I mean, other than like we drank a lot of the beers that we buy often. I don't
There was
know.
a lot of Boulevard in here.
Yeah,
There was a lot of
because we
Which
buy
was
a lot
good.
of Boulevard.
Well, what I was surprised about is despite there being a good mix is that I didn't get as diverse as I thought I would have. I think I bought like the build your own 6-packs, which they don't do at that place anymore, that I was getting
really?
them from. But other people would have those beers and I would gravitate toward some. But I had multiple Tank 7s, multiple Guinness, especially after coming back from Ireland. I was in a big Guinness phase and had a lot of Guinness. And also had some Odell's that I really enjoyed. But I'd say after looking back on it, just if anybody's looking for some good stuff to taste, Tank 7, which I'm drinking today, I'd still say is the king. I freaking love...
Just free advertising.
I love Tank 7.
Shout out Boulevard.
Boulevard kills it on Tank 7 if that's in your local liquor store, grab it up. But I also, special shout out, and that's why I got both of them. I really enjoyed that Odell Isolation Ale.
Those are also my top two.
Yeah, dang.
Because I didn't really want to say Boulevard because like
Ugh.
we're from Kansas City
Wow.
and Boulevard is the local beer. I mean, there's lots
slash Belgian.
there are a lot of local beers.
Hot owned by Belgians
owned
was
by
the
Belgians.
Oh, sorry, not owned. That's
Not
that
owned by
shouts out
Belgians.
to one of the
Excuse
Underground
you.
Railroad episodes.
But Tank 7 by Boulevard Brewing is masterful.
Hard to beat it. Danny,
It's so
any
good.
top drinks for you?
Masterful.
It's masterful.
I really maybe this is my recency bias, but I really like
Michelob Ultra.
the Michelob
Oh,
Ultra that I
heck
had.
yeah.
I was doing you guys a favor.
This podcast is shut down
Listen.
now. After
No, I really liked the Blood Orange one that I had by Revolver Brewing.
yep, had that. That was a
in-
Halloween leftover.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
That
during
was a good one.
Northwest. I really liked that one.
Oh, Halloween, good one.
And I also appreciated when Emily was on the pod and we were talking about Boulevard unfiltered wheat, and Emily said, "Is there a filtered wheat?"
Just
just-
you gotta check.
She just wanted to know.
I think I might have said that.
But
actually.
I was drinking a Boulevard Hefeweizen during that episode, and I liked it.
Yeah.
Danny listens to it.
I don't know if you said it, but
So-
Emily said it
Okay.
in this episode. I have receipts.
Don't
Receipts, dude.
take credit for that.
So yeah, those were the beers. Despite having some repeats, I was pretty proud of how diverse the selection was, and I'd like to try to continue to be diverse next season. We'll see how it goes,
All
but I think
Michelob
it's
Ultra all
worth
the time.
it. Cool. Well, those were favorite beers, and then the last thing here as a cliffhanger. So as I had mentioned, there's just going to be a very brief hiatus.
It won't be that.
It's not
going to
be
the
It's
breaks
just
we've
gonna be
really
taken
that long.
before.
What we
but
normally
it'll
do.
probably be like late January, early February when we get back. But we're going to be talking about, for this final section of the season finale, our book choices for next season. So if you recall, at the beginning of this season, we did 7 total, but we started out just so we had a good list. And for anybody that's listening to this and is wanting to do some homework ahead of season 2, we're just going to give the first 3 that we'll be reading in the order that we'll be reading them. I think we'll do the same order, if that's cool. And so it'll be the first 3. We'll have one in the middle that we'll all kind of choose. Maybe have a guest on that one again, as we did this time. And then during that 4th one, we'll choose the back 3. But we're doing the first 3 on this one, and we're going to go around the circle and say what's coming up. So for me, we had some discussions, and mine actually ended up getting chosen because there's some tie-in to some discussion questions on Jamie's choice. So it's going to kind of lead in quite nicely here. But my book choice for the first book of season 2 is As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner.
Woo.
Hey.
Woo. Very nice. My first choice for the second season, we don't need a drum.
It's happening.
Is Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward, the
Woo.
National Book Award winner from, I think, 2018. No, 2017 maybe. Recently. But I've heard a lot of good things about Jesmyn Ward's writing, and I haven't read anything by her, so that's why I picked it.
Cool.
Nice. My first choice for season 2 is Rabbit Run by John Updike.
Hey.
I'm just want to read it. It's just on my list. We
No,
also
there is a specific
well,
reason.
okay. Well, do we want to
The
talk
mug.
about this specific reason? Okay,
We've
so
talked about
there's
the
a
mug very briefly. We've talked about it before.
There's a mug. It has a bookshelf of books on it as an illustration, and I have decided.
You have decided.
You immediately look at Brian.
You have
Because I
decided.
knew you were going to say something. Do you remember earlier when I
Oh.
said we and you said, is
My
this
God.
a we decision?
This was a Brian decision.
All right, it was not a Brian decision. I came over to their house and there was a mug with books on it, and I wanted to read all the books on the mug. Also,
I was
Brian
already
wants
on the
to.
goal.
All right. Well, I'm further ahead than you are.
No, you are not. I have
Alright,
receipts on that.
This is up for debate.
This is not up for debate.
This is alleged. Anyway, Rabbit Run is on the mug, and I decided that it would be a good, I don't know, it would be a good choice for season 2.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that
Perfect.
should be it. We
Perfect.
appreciate if anybody has gotten to this point and has listened to every episode.
Congratulations.
Please comment and
Come
tell us.
on.
Yeah, let us know.
Like, we
Y'all
want
are
to know
killing
that
it.
you're here and listening.
Which I don't know, because we're gonna during this brief hiatus put these up on real podcasting platforms, and so there may not be comments. But yeah, if you're on Brian's Book Bastion,
If you're on YouTube,
yeah,
leave us a comment.
if you're on YouTube, this is on. I'll continue to upload episodes to the YouTube channel, but it is Brian's Book Bastion. If you're listening on a different platform and want to say something, if you want to have some interaction with your hosts here at
interact with us.
BTWB.
We like interaction.
Dumpster Fire, if you've made it this far. YouTuber Dumpster Fire, shouts out Dumpster Fire.
Dumpster Fire, we love you.
Has commented, and we're all about Dumpster Fire. We stand a Dumpster Fire.
We do stand.
So anyway, that will wrap up season 1. We did some congratulations previously, but good job, guys.
We made it a year.
This has been
and
a
officially a
year-long
full season.
endeavor, and I'm proud of us.
Yeah, and this ended up being a full episode. I thought we maybe would have like a 30-minute. We got all the way over an hour.
Nice. Good for us.
Fantastic, dude. So yeah, we will be excited to be back. We'll see if we can grab a couple more guests. We did have 2 guests on this first season. Hoping for at least one.
Maybe we'll have a returning guest.
Maybe a returning guest. That'd be fun. Andrew or Emily. That'd be a good one. But yeah, we will be back very soon. We appreciate you listening. And we will see you again very soon. Thanks, guys.
Squeeby-dooby.
Oh, yeah. we all have to scat. That's only
I
fitting
did
for the
already.
season finale. 1,
That's
2,
it.
3, 4.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.